Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we started our discussion related to circuit breaker. Circuit breaker is used to implement fault tolerant systems. Circuit breaker is used to implement fault tolerant systems. That means when main logic is not able to execute, if we are getting any exceptions in the main logic, then we want to execute the fallback logic to handle the request. For that, we are using circuit breaker. So the systems which are having fault tolerant systems are called as resilience systems. So when we got some exception, then we are executing a fallback logic. Not every time. If 5 requests failed continuously, then next I want to execute only fallback logic. For that, we are going for circuit breaker concept. That's fine. So today we are going to talk about distributed cache by using Redis. What is distributed cache by using Redis? Right now, can anyone tell me what is cache in the project? Can anyone tell me what is a cache in the project? Guys, what is a cache? Any idea? Anybody can speak out. What is cache memory? Can anybody give the answer? What is cache memory?
It's a buffer memory.
Yes, cache is a temporary memory which is used to access very frequently. Okay, cache is a temporary storage. Cache is a temporary storage. When our application want to access same data multiple times, then it is recommended to store in the cache. When our application wants to access same data frequently, when our application want to access same data frequently, then we will use cache memory. When our application wants to access same data frequently, then we will use cache memory. Cache will improve performance of our application. Cache is a temporary storage. When our application wants to access same data frequently, then we will use cache memory. Cache will improve performance of the application. Cache will improve performance of our application. Are you clear with my point? Now, so here if you observe, our application want to access some data. The data is available in the database. This is our Java application. This is our Java application, and this is a database. There is some data in the database table. I want to use that data in my application. I want to use the data in my application. So my application should connect with the database and retrieve the data. My application should connect with the database and retrieve the data. My application should connect with the database and retrieve the data. Like this. So every time application should connect with the database in order to retrieve the data. Every time application should connect with the database in order to retrieve the data. But here, retrieving the data from the database is a costly operation. Why? Because we need to load the driver, we need to create the connection, then we need to communicate with the database, and we need to retrieve the data. So database communication is a costly operation. Database communication is costly operation. Are you getting my point? Application should connect with the database and application should retrieve the data from the database. Database communication is a costly operation. Now, so see here, let's take our project as an example. Let us take our project as an example. Now, in our project, we are having a registration option. When you click on this register button, when you click on some register button, some country codes are coming in the drop down. Country codes are coming in the drop down. So when a first person click on register button, some country codes are coming in the drop down. When first person click on the register button, country names are coming from the database into the drop down. Okay, so when you click on the register button, country codes will be retrieved from the database and will be displayed here. When somebody else created the same register button, one more time we will get the data from the database. When one more person click on the register button, we will get the data from the database. When the fifth person click on the register button, fifth time we will get the data from the database. When the sixth time click on the register button, we will get the data. When the seventh person click on the register, we will get the data. So but if you observe, for every user the data is changing. For every user the data is not changing. Guys, can you tell me, for every user the data is changing, the country codes drop down data is changing from user to user. It is a static data for every user. You can
Static,
unmute and you can speak out.
static data.
So this is a static data. This is a static data. This data is not changing. This data is not changing from person to person. It is a static data. When the data is static, do I really need to retrieve it from the database for every user? Is it recommended?
Uh,
Is it recommended to retrieve this data from the database every time?
No.
Not required. Why? Because every time we need to open a connection with the database, we need to register the driver, we need to open the connection, we need to execute the query, and we need to retrieve the data from the database. So if you try to retrieve the same data again and again from the database, your application performance will be degraded. What will happen, guys? Your application performance will be degraded. So now, in order to improve the performance of the application in the projects, we are going to use a cache concept. Now here, my application will be available. And here, our cache will be available. Here, application will be available. And here, cache will be available. And here, database will be available. Here database will be available. So we are going to retrieve the data from the database. We will store into cache. Our application will access the data from the cache only. Our application will access the data from the cache memory. Now, what is the advantage? What is the advantage if we use cache memory like this? For every request, do I need to hit the database or I no need to hit the database? My application can access this cache. My microservice, first microservice can access the data from the cache, and my second microservice also can access the data from the cache. My first microservice will access the data from the cache. My second microservice also will access the data from the cache. Now, so here, if you want to retrieve the data from the database, you have two approaches. Go for first approach, retrieving the data from the database directly. Retrieve data from DB. Retrieve data from DB. Retrieve data from cache. Retrieve data from DB. Retrieve data from cache. So if you want to retrieve the data from the database, every time you need to load the driver, you need to create the connection, you need to execute the query, and you need to retrieve the data. So network call is costly. Database communication, DB communication is costly operation. Costly operation means it will take more time. DB operation is a costly operation. It will take more time. It will take more time. Understand? Retrieving the data from the cache will improve performance. Cache memory cache memory will improve performance of our application. So retrieving the data from the database is a costly operation. Retrieving the data from the cache will improve performance of our application. Now here, simple example. When a person click on the register, I need to get the data from the database table. I need to display in the drop down. I need to get the data from the database table and I need to display in the drop down. Okay, guys, fine. So for every user, assume that there are 100 users are creating accounts in our application. There are 100 users who are creating the accounts in our application. So for 100 users, 100 times I need to retrieve the data from the table. So 100 requests are coming to create the new accounts. For 100 people, I need to execute the same query 100 times. I need to read the same data from the database. So every time I need to load the driver, I need to create the connection, I need to execute the query, I need to retrieve the data. So if I am retrieving the data for 100 times also, the data which I am retrieving is same, the table is same, the data is same. When the data is same, why to retrieve the same data again and again? Why to retrieve the same data again and again? Because the data is the same, right? The data is same. Why to retrieve the same data again and again? That communication is costly operation. DB communication is costly operation. Then how can we improve the performance of our application? To improve performance of our application, we are going to use cache memory. What is cache? Cache is a storage. Cache is a storage. Instead of retrieving the data from the database directly, we will retrieve the data from the database only one time. We will store in the cache memory. When our application want to access that data, instead of hitting the data from the data, instead of retrieving the data from the database, we will retrieve the data from cache only. Our application wants to retrieve the data, but not from the database, because retrieving the data from the database is costly operation. Retrieving the data from the database is costly operation. So we are going to retrieve the data from cache memory. Sir, how to work with this cache memory? Where this cache will be available? That cache we are going to use as Redis. What is the cache we have here? The cache which we have is a Redis. So Redis is distributed cache. That means multiple applications can connect to the same cache memory and we can retrieve the data. Multiple applications can connect to the same cache memory and we can retrieve the data. What is the advantage if you go for this cache memory? Cache memory will improve the performance of application because DB calls are going to reduce. If the DB calls are reduced, then definitely application performance will be improved. DB calls will be reduced. When the DB calls got reduced, application performance will be improved. Are you able to understand my point? Are you guys able to understand my point? Retrieve the data from the database. It is a costly operation. Retrieving the data from the cache, it will improve performance of our application. Which cache we are going to use? Redis cache we are going to use. Spring Boot with Redis. Cache will improve performance of our application. Cache is a temporary storage. When our application want to access same data frequently, then we will use cache. Cache will improve performance of our application by reducing database calls. Note, database calls are always costly. Database calls are always costly, which will take more time to execute. To reduce database calls, to reduce number of round trips between application and database, to reduce number of round trips between application and database, we will use cache. To reduce number of round trips between application and database, we will use cache memory. Or we can use Redis cache. We can use Redis cache. Redis is one of the distributed cache. Redis is one of the distributed cache available in the market. Redis is one of the distributed cache available in the market. Redis is one of the distributed cache available in the market. Redis will store the data in key value pair. Redis will store data. Redis will store the data in key value pair. It is a data store. Redis is a distributed cache. Multiple applications can connect to the Redis cache, can store and retrieve the data. Redis is a distributed cache. What is the meaning of distributed cache? Only one application can access the cache, or multiple applications can access this cache. Redis is one of the distributed cache available in the market. Redis will store data in key value pair. Redis will store data in key value pair. Multiple applications can connect with Redis cache at a time. Multiple applications can connect with Redis cache at a time. So as multiple applications are connecting with the Redis cache at a time, we can call Redis cache as a distributed cache. So here the data is available in the database. Multiple projects, I mean to say multiple microservices want to access the data. So these two microservices are available in the project. These two microservices want to access the same data. So instead of hitting the database to retrieve the data, we can take the data from the database and we can store into Redis cache. My two microservices can communicate with the Redis cache and they can store the data and they can retrieve the data. So as multiple applications are sharing this cache data, that cache is called as distributed cache. That cache is called as distributed cache. So for the Redis, there is an official website, Redis, redis.io, redis.io. Okay. Now, the open source in-memory data store used by millions of developers as a database, cache, streaming engine, and message broker. So what is this Redis? What is this Redis? Definition. Redis, the open source in-memory data store used by millions of developers as a database, as a cache, as a streaming engine, and as a message broker. So multiple applications can connect with the Redis cache. One application can store a message, another application can take a message. So Redis cache can act as a message broker between two applications. Publisher application, subscriber application. One application will publish a message, another application will subscribe to that message. So if it is acting as a mediator between two applications, then we can call this as message broker. It is the open source in-memory data store used by millions of developers as a database, cache, streaming engine, and message broker. Redis is one of the distributed cache available in the market. Redis will store data in key value pair. Multiple applications can connect with the Redis cache at a time. The open source in-memory data store used by millions of developers as a database, cache, streaming engine, and message broker. Are you clear with my point? We are having several message brokers in the market. RabbitMQ, ActiveMQ, Apache Kafka, Redis, these all are message brokers. Apache Kafka is one of the famous message broker available in the market. We can use Redis also as a message broker. Yep. Can you guys please read these points? What is cache? Why we are going for cache? What is cache and why we are going for cache? Cache is a temporary storage. When our application want to access same data frequently, then we will use cache memory. Cache will improve performance of our application by reducing database calls. Okay, guys. Now, so here database calls are always costly, which will take more time to execute. Database calls are always costly, which will take more time to execute. So to reduce the number of database calls or to reduce the number of round trips between application and database, we will use cache concept. Which cache is more famous in the market? Redis cache is more famous in the market. What is this Redis? Redis is one of the distributed cache available in the market. Redis will store data in key value pair format. It is a data store. Multiple applications can connect with the Redis cache at a time. It is the open source in-memory data store used by millions of developers as a database, cache, streaming engine, and message broker. Message broker. So now you can try the Redis cloud, or you can download Redis. So if you click on download Redis stable version, you can download this Redis stable version. You can download Redis from the Docker. You can download the Redis from the doc by using Docker. You can run your Redis, or normal Redis you can download. Redis downloads section. Go to Redis Docker Hub. Download Redis unstable build. Download Redis stable build. Download 6.2.7. So the Redis downloaded as a zip file. Redis downloaded as a zip file. So once you download that Redis, there we can see one file to run the Redis. I think I have already downloaded that Redis. In softwares, Redis, yeah. Redis is available here. Redis server.exe file is available. I have downloaded the Redis. Once we extract the Redis software, here you can see Redis server.exe. When you run the server.exe, my Redis server started. It is running on the port number 6379. Okay, download the Redis setup. Redis setup. We can download Redis directly as a zip file and we can set up, or we can download the Redis by using Docker also. So if you are using a Docker, then you can download the Redis by using that Docker. So currently I'm going to show you how to download and set up the Redis in our local system. Okay, so download the Redis using this URL. Download Redis software. Download Redis software URL. Okay, so once you download it, extract that zip file, run Redis server.exe file. Run Redis server.exe file. Note by default it runs on 6379 port. By default Redis server running on 6379 port number in my local system only. So tomorrow in the company, the Redis server will run on the remote machine, but currently I'm running Redis on my local machine. Currently I'm running the Redis on the local machine. Tomorrow in the company, Redis will run on the remote machine. When the Redis is running on the remote machine, they will give the URL to connect with the Redis server. But currently Redis is running in the same machine. I'm able to run the Redis server. How I am running the Redis server? Here I have a file called redis server.exe. When I execute that file, my Redis server is started. It is running in the standalone mode. It is running on the port number 6379 in my local system. How can I verify? Am I able to connect with the Redis server? For that, there is one more software called redis CLI.exe. When I run this Redis CLI, it is connected to Redis server in the local host. 127.0.0.1 means localhost colon 6379. In the local host, my Redis server is running. 6379 is the port. When I execute this CLI.exe, Redis CLI.exe, Redis client software is opened. The Redis client software is connected to Redis server software. Now, how to check is my client able to connect to the server using ping? When we give ping command, it is responding as pong. That means server is working. We are able to connect from our client machine to server machine. When I execute ping, I'm getting the response as a pong. That means connections are working successfully. Run redis cli.exe. Run redis cli.exe file. Type ping in the type ping command in redis CLI. Then it will connect with the server. It will connect with the server and server will respond. Server will respond as pong. Server will respond as pong. Type ping command in the redis CLI. Server will respond with pong as a response. Server will respond. Server will respond with pong as response. With pong as response. So Redis is running in my local. I downloaded the Redis zip file. Once I extract the Redis zip file, I have redis server.exe. By default, it is running on the port number 6379. Run the redis cli.exe file. Type ping command in the redis CLI. Server will respond with pong as a response. Server will respond with pong as a response. That means our Redis setup is ready. So Redis server is running in the local. Using client, I'm able to connect with the Redis server. Now we need to do application. My Spring Boot application should connect with the Redis server. Okay, Spring Boot with Redis integration. How to integrate our Spring Boot application with Redis? Spring Boot with Redis integration. Spring Boot with Redis integration. So Spring Boot application can be integrated with Redis server. For that, there is a dependency. If Spring Boot application want to connect with the database, we have JDBC dependency. If Spring Boot want to connect with the database using JPA, we have a JPA dependency. Similarly, Spring Boot can connect with the Redis server also by using Redis dependency. So Spring Boot application provided one dependency called Redis dependency. Now, let me show you what is the dependency that we have. Let me show you what is the dependency that we have. Spring Boot with Redis integration. Spring Boot with Redis integration. Spring Boot provided a POM starter. Spring Boot provided starter POM to connect with Redis server. Spring Boot provided starter POM to connect with Redis server. Yep. Let's go here. File new starter project. File new starter project. Spring Boot microservice Redis cache. Spring Boot microservice Redis cache. Next, here I'm taking web starter, I'm taking Lombok, I'm taking DevTools. Along with this, I need to use Redis. Along with this, I need to use Redis. Okay, Spring Data reactive Redis, Spring Data Redis. Okay, so now here we have the dependencies. Spring Data Redis I'm using. Click on finish. So to connect with the database, we have JDBC dependency. Similarly, to connect with Redis server, we have Redis dependency. Spring Boot provided starter form to connect with Redis server. Okay, now how we are going to connect with this Redis server using our Spring Boot application? What is the code we need to write inside our Spring Boot application to connect with the Redis server? So here assume that our Redis server is available. Assume that here our Redis server is available. Now to establish connection with the Redis server, we are going to use one component called JD's connection factory. JD's connection factory. This JD's connection factory is a bean which is used to set up the connection with Redis server. So if you want to connect with the database properties are required. Similarly, to connect with the Redis server, JD's connection factory will be used. This JD's connection factory will be injected into Redis template. So how we have a JDBC template, REST template, Kafka template. Similarly, we have one predefined class called Redis template. There is a predefined class called Redis template. So this JD's connection factory object will be injected to Redis template. Redis template. So Redis server already running in my system. So Redis server running in my local machine with the port number as 6379. Now my Java application, I mean to say my Spring Boot application should connect with the Redis server. So to establish connection between the Java application and the Redis server, we are going to give the JD's connection factory object with the Redis server details. So we will give Redis server details to JD's connection factory. JD's connection factory will connect the Java application to Redis server. It will act as a mediator. Currently my Redis server running in the local machine. So no need to give any URL. Tomorrow in the company, our Redis servers will run in the remote machine. So my Java application, my Spring Boot application should connect with the Redis server. To connect Spring Boot application with the Redis server, we have Redis starter available, POM starter available. How we have web starter, Webflux starter, right? Actuator, Tomcat starter. Similarly, in the Spring Boot, we have Redis starter. So Spring Boot provided starter POM to connect with Redis server. So here, in order to connect with the Redis server details we will configure in the JD's connection factory. JD's connection factory will interact with the Redis server. Okay. Now, sir, how can we connect with the Redis server? How can we write that JD's connection factory? So here you can take a Redis config class, new class config, Redis config. In this class, I'm going to write the configuration related to Redis. I will represent this class as a configuration class. How can we represent this class as a configuration class? By using configuration annotation. I'm representing this class as a configuration class by using configuration annotation. Configuration. Now I want to represent JD's connection factory. So public JD's connection factory, public JD's connection factory bean we are going to create. JD's connection factory get JD's connection. Get JD's connection. So now here JD's connection factory is equal to new JD's connection factory. Now for the factory dot set the details where your client name, what is the database, what is the host name, what is the password, All these details we can set. Host name means IP, where that Redis is available. Factory dot set password, factory dot set port, factory dot set port, like this. If the Redis is running in the different machines, then we are going to specify all the details of the Redis. But currently my Redis is available in the same machine. So I no need to set any host name or password or port number, because application, Spring Boot application running in my computer, Redis server also running in my computer. So I no need to specify any host, password or port number. I will make it as a bean so that IOC container will create the object for this bean. Are you clear? Spring Boot provided a starter form. Using that starter form, I'm trying to create the object for Jedis connection factory. What is the purpose of Jedis connection factory? Jedis connection factory is used to communicate with the Redis server. Jedis connection factory is used to communicate with the Redis server. So today, both are running in the same machine, but tomorrow in the real time, project will run in one machine, Redis server will run in one machine. How can we establish connection between our Java application and the Redis server? This is my Java application. This is my Spring Boot application. How can we set up the connection between Spring Boot application and the Redis server? That's where Jedis connection factory bean comes into picture. Now I need to inject this Redis connection factory bean into Redis template. I need to inject Jedis connection factory bean into Redis template. Okay, let me create the bean for Redis template. Let me create the bean for Redis template. So public Redis template, public Redis template, public Redis template, string comma string get Redis template. For this, I'm going to take Jedis connection factory. Okay. Now Redis template, Redis template, Redis template, RT is equal to new Redis template with a connection factory, with Redis template. For the Redis template, we are going to specify this factory object. The constructor template is undefined. Factory dot get connection. Factory dot get connection. So I'm going to get the Jedis connection factory object. Using that connection factory, we are going to create Redis template object. For this Redis template, I need to pass that connection object. New Redis template. What is the parameter it is taking? Reactive Redis connection factory. Reactive Redis template object. Okay, so first let me create this object. Redis template object return RT. So I'm creating Redis template object. Guys, for this Redis template object, we need to supply this is Jedis connection. I will check what is the parameter that they are using to connect our Jedis connection object with the Redis template. Jedis connection with the Redis template. So what is this Jedis connection factory and what is this Redis template? Jedis connection factory is used to establish connection between Jedis connection factory is used to establish the connection between our Java application and Redis server. It is used to establish the connection between our Java application and Redis server. Then what is this Redis template? Redis template is providing the methods to perform the operation. So I want to insert the data. I want to insert the data into Redis server, or I want to retrieve the data from the Redis server. Okay. I want to insert the data, or I want to retrieve the data. I want to retrieve the data, or I want to insert the data, or I want to retrieve the data. So first here I'm creating JD's connection factory object. So JD's connection factory object I'm representing as a bean. This bean is used to establish connection with the Redis server. Then this JD's connection factory object I want to inject into my Redis template. Okay, I'm creating one Redis template object. What data you want to store into the Redis server, that can be represented by using this Redis template. Now for this Redis template, I need to set the JD's connection. RT dot set connection factory, that is get JD's connection. Get JD's connection. Whatever the factory that we are taking, that factory you can take, or you can pass this factory object also directly. So I'm creating JD's connection factory object. Using that JD's connection factory object, I'm creating my Redis template. So here, this is my customizing, it is my bean customization. I am creating the object for JD's connection factory, and I'm creating the object for the Redis template. JD's connection factory object I'm injecting into Redis template. Are you able to understand? Are you able to understand what I'm trying to do here? Are you able to understand what I'm trying to do here? I created JD's connection factory. That JD's connection factory I injected into Redis template. JD's connection factory I created. It contains the connection details with the Redis server. That JD's connection factory object is injected into Redis template. Now, using this Redis template, I am going to get one class called hash operations. What is the class, guys? There is one class called hash operations. Hash operations will represent the data in the form of hash name, key name, and value name. Three things will be available for hash operations. Hash operations will represent hash name, key name, value name. So data will be stored in the form of key value pair. Data will be stored in the form of key value pair. But those keys, basically hash name is nothing but a table name. So in the database table, we will store the data in the form of rows and columns, right? Similarly, in the Redis, we are going to store the data in the form of hash. Hash basically your table name. Suppose, for example, I want to store the courses details into one table. Okay, SBMS faculty is Ashok. SBMS faculty is Ashok. React faculty is Rakesh. Okay, faculty is Rakesh. GCP faculty is Ganesh. GCP faculty is Ganesh. Azure faculty is Lakshman. AWS faculty is Ashok. So like this, we want to store course name and faculty name. This is a key and this is value. SBMS is a key, faculty is a value. React is a key, faculty is a value. This is key value. But what is this data? This data is courses data, hash courses. Okay, now how we are going to represent this? Courses is a hash name, SBMS Ashok. Now you understand what is the hash now? Hash name is courses. SBMS is a key. Ashok is a value. Courses. SBMS is a key. Ashok is a value. So similarly, when I want to store one more record, then what I will do? I will use courses is a hash. Is a hash. Now Azure. Azure is the key. Lakshman is the value for that. Are you understanding What is this hash operations? Hash name, key name, value name. Now, hash operations, it provided methods to perform CRUD operations with the Redis. Hash operations, it is providing methods. It is providing methods to perform operations. It is providing methods to perform operations with a Redis server. You can insert the data, or you can update the data, or you can delete the data. Whatever you want, you can do it by using hash operations. Hash operations is a class that hash operations contains methods to perform the actual operations. So here courses is a hash. Courses is a hash. Inside the hash, we are having key and value. Suppose if I want to store books data, book price. Okay, so now hash will be books. So you can consider hash as a table. You can consider hash as a table. By using that hash, we are going to create a record in the form of key and value. You can create the record in the form of key and value. Now let me create my REST controller. Let me create my REST controller. Course REST controller. Course REST controller. So now this one I will represent as a REST controller. I will represent this as a REST controller. Inside this REST controller, I'm injecting REST Redis template, private Redis template. So key is a string, value is also a string. This is my Redis template. Redis template. Now for this REST controller, I will write a constructor, public course REST controller. Public course REST controller. For this REST controller, I will take Redis template as a dependent object. Redis template as a dependent object. Constructor injection. This dot Redis template is equal to Redis template. Now Redis template dot ops for hash. Ops for hash. When I go for ops for hash, I'm getting hash ops. So what I'm getting here? I'm getting hash operations. Hash operations. Redis template is giving me hash operations object. By using this hash operations, I can perform operations with the Redis server. Now guys, observe what I am trying to do. First, I created one boot application. In that boot application, I configured Redis dependency. First, I created a boot application. In the boot application, I configured Redis dependency. Spring Boot starter data, Redis dependency I configured in the boot application. Then I have created one Redis config class. JD's connection factory bean object I created. JD's connection factory bean is used to connect with the Redis server. JD's connection factory bean is used to connect with the Redis server. Then fine. So if I want to work with the Redis server, I need a Redis template. So I created a Redis template object. In that Redis template object, I'm injecting JD's connection factory. Okay. Then I'm injecting that Redis template into my REST controller. Using that Redis template, I'm getting hash operations. What is a hash? Hash is used to represent the data type. So this is course data, this is employee data, this is books data, this is address data. So what data you are storing, we need to give one hash name. What data we are storing, we need to give a hash name. Are you getting my point? What data we want to store, we want to give the some hash name. Like that, I'm going to store this data. Okay, now I'm injecting Redis template object through constructor. How many parameters constructors available in my REST controller? How many constructors are available in my REST controller? I have more than one constructor. I have only one parameter constructor. I have only one parameter constructor. When I have only one parameter as a constructor, do I need to specify auto wiring? When I'm having only one parameter as a constructor, do I need to specify @auto void? Do I need to specify that? Is it required? Is it required to specify @auto wiring? No, not required, because my constructor is taking Redis template as a argument. So my constructor is a my controller is having a constructor argument. My controller is a REST controller. So IOC container should create the object for my course REST controller. To create the object for the course REST controller, it should call this zero parameter. It should call this parameter constructor. For this parameter constructor, Redis template is a parameter. Already I am creating the Redis template bean. This Redis template bean will be injected into my course REST controller through constructor. So then once this constructor injection happened, I'm initializing this variable. By using this variable, I am getting hash operations. What is a hash? Hash will represent a key. What type of data it is? Table name, you can say. Hash is a table name. The data will be stored in the form of key value. The data will be stored in the form of key value. Okay. Now, sir, I want to store some data. I want to store some data. Okay. I want to store some course data. How can I store course data into Redis server? How can I store the course data into Redis server? Now you can write the methods here. You can write the methods here. Public string store data. A dummy method I am writing. Public string store data, return data, return success. Return success. How can we store the data? By using hash ops. Hash ops dot put key, hash key, object, that is the value. What is key? What is your hash key? Key, hash key. Now key I'm keeping as SBMS. Hash key, key, hash key I'm going to specify. And what is the value that you want to store? So value, I want to store it as a Ashok. Okay. Now hash key I'm going to store, and a hash key I'm going to store by using put method. Hash key must not be null. Hash key must not be null. Key, hash key, and value we are going to store here. Are you able to understand my point? How to store the data into Redis? In order to store the data into Redis, we are going to use that data. Now, so let me put the key as courses. So this is our SBMS and Ashok. So this is used to store the data. This is used to store the data. Suppose if you want to get the data, public string get data. Public string get data. So here we have hash ops dot get key comma hash key. What is my key? My key is courses. My hash key I'm giving as a SBMS. SBMS. I want to get the data. So which is going to give you one object. It is going to give you one object. You can, we are getting that we are storing string value. So we can typecast that to string. Okay. Return value. Return value like this. Key, hash key, and value. This is key value pair. This key value pair belongs to this courses. So this is used to store the data. It is used to get the data. Similarly, you can update the data and you can delete the data also. Similarly, you can update the data and you can delete the data also. I'm writing some dummy methods here. I'm writing some dummy methods here. Course REST controller. So let me bind them. Get mapping slash store, get mapping slash get or slash data. That's it. Store, retrieve, something like this, slash store slash data. So like this, you can store the data. This value can be one object also. I want to store one user object. So you can store one user object also here. So tomorrow I will show you how can we store the data into Redis cache. How can we retrieve the data from the Redis cache? How can we store the data into Redis cache? How can we retrieve the data from the Redis cache? That also we can discuss. So you understand the basic concept, how we are going to set up our functionality with the Redis server. Basic setup, you got it. So a example, we will write the code. This is example is also done, but here I'm storing key value as a string. So tomorrow I want to store JSON data as a value. User data I want to store in the Redis. That user data I will take as a post mapping method. Very simple. So here I'm going to take one class, new class dot binding. I will take one user class. I will take one user class. For this user class, I will take private integer, user ID, private string, name, and private integer age. Now I will add lombok at the rate data. Now here, instead of get mapping, now I will give it as a post mapping. Instead of get mapping, I will give as a post mapping. Okay. So student data, whatever the data that I'm user data, whatever the data I'm getting, the JSON data I can store. String user data. Whatever the user data I am getting, I can store that user data directly. I can give some key as a one, something like this, or key I can take as a user data IDs. We can get it. So that's that data we are going to store here. So if you want to read that data as a user binding object, then what we can specify here, we can specify user dot get user ID value is user data. I can put like this. Courses are users, my users. I can give the hash name as a users now. Here I can specify get user data integer user ID. That user ID I'm expecting as a path variable. I'm expecting as a path variable. So based on the user ID, I can get this data. Based on the user ID, I can get this data. It is used to store the user. It is used to retrieve the user. One user record I will store. The user data will come as a JSON. I will take this user data as a request body. I will read that user data as a request body data. I will store that user data and I'm going to get the user data. Or I can make it as a some persons. My hash name is a persons. Hash name is persons. It is having user ID, username, and age. That data I will send as a JSON. Refresh, run as boot application. Now I'm putting the data into Redis by using hash ops put method. This is my hash name and this is the key. User ID is the key, user data is the value. User ID is the key, user ID is the value. Right here I'm trying to get the data. So this is my hash name and this is the key. First I'm storing the data in the form of key and value. Then I'm trying to retrieve the data based on the key. User ID is my key. All right. So it is failed. Course rest controller required a single bean, but two beans found, but two were found in the class path resource. Redis template. get Redis template. This dot Redis template. Using Redis template, we are using ops for a hash. Using hash ops, we are doing the injection. This is not required now. Okay. Refresh, run as boot app. Parameter 0 of constructor. Course rest controller required. A single bean, but 2 are found. String Redis template defined by method string Redis template in the class path resource. Using qualifier to identify the bean that should be consumed. Bean, let me make it as primary. It is getting confused. It should take our Redis template object or it should take the default Redis template object. Let's do maven update. Maven update. Right click, run as boot application. Class not found exception. Safe encoder. Failed to instantiate. Unsatisfied dependency injection. Course rest controller. No class definition found error. Safe encoder. What is missing? Let us check this. JD's connection factory. Return JD's connection factory. JD's version is not compatible with Redis. Version conflict. Spring Boot starter data Redis. Exclusion. It is asking some extra dependency, guys. Let's try this. pom.xml. Along with the starter data Redis, I'm adding JD's client. Let's see. Will it be able to solve the issue? Right click, run as boot application. No, it is not solving our issue. Class not found exception. Let me update this project. Maven update, force update. Right click, run as boot application. Yes, perfect. Now our application is working as expected. So there is some compatibility issue, guys. So that's why whatever the error I got, I just pasted my error in the Google. So I got the solution from Stack Overflow. So what is the solution? In the starter data Redis, there is one dependency which we don't need, that let a queue core, something, let a queue core is there. I have excluded the dependency from the Redis and I added JDIS client. I added JDIS client. So we are able to up our application. We are able to run our application. Now, so as our application is ready, now we can send a request to our REST controller. Inside the REST controller, we have post method and we have get request method. We have a post method and we are having a get request method. So post method is used to store the data. This post method is expecting user data in the request body. So whatever the user data will come in the request body, it will store that data into Redis under persons key. Persons is my hash name. So user ID is the key and user data is the value. Hash ops dot put, it is used to store the data. Similarly, to retrieve the data, I'm using hash ops dot get key comma this user ID. This is a hash name. This is the actual record key. So this is a hash name. This is a record key. So key comma value. I'm using this method to store the data. I'm using this method to retrieve the data. Let's try once. Is it working or not? Application is running. Let me go to Postman. Let me go to Postman to send the request because I need to send a post request for this. So I need to use Postman to send a post request. User data it is expecting in the request body. So user data is in the form of key value. Let me send a post request. HTTP colon localhost colon 8080 slash store. Data it is user ID, name and age. User ID, name and age. User ID is 101. Name I'm giving as some Ashok and age I'm giving as 20. Okay. I'm trying to send a request to my Redis server. Perfect. Click on send, remove these headers, content type is a JSON, remove all these things. So data is going in the JSON format. Click on send. It is failing, cannot serialize. Default serializer requires to payload but received a object type. Redis serializer, it is not able to do the serialization. 1 second. JDK serialization. Okay, maybe the problem is value type. In the Redis config class, we gave the value as a string. This can be the reason. We are trying to store user data, so we need to specify value will be user type. Value will be user type. Here also value is the user type. Value is the user type. Okay. So let's stop this. Let's run the application. Run as boot application. Application started. Go to this, send. Now also problem. Default serializer requires a payload but received an object of type. Default serializer requires but received a payload. Maybe here I need to specify user hash operations. Then I will get user record. I will return user record. Run it once again. Run as boot application. I want to store my user data and I want to retrieve that data. Okay, click on send. Default serializer requires a payload but receive the object. Default serializer we are setting user object only, right? User, 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 user ID, that is integer, and it is user type. For hash operations, string, integer, user. User is the value, ID, string is the hash name. Here also string and user. I can specify here integer. Redis template key is integer. Run as boot application. Redis template injecting type. Redis template is integer type. Hash operations will be integer type. Hash ops dot put. Okay, this is a string only. String integer, right? Guys, somewhere it is not able to understand our user object. It is expecting a payload, but I'm giving the user data. Somewhere that is mismatching. Send. No, it is failing. Default serializer requires a serializable payload, but received a object. It is expecting serializer payload, but we gave the object. Post mapping, request body. Is request body correct? Yes. User, user data. Anything I'm missing, guys? Serialization issue. Do I need to implement a serializable? Implement serializable. Let's try. Yep. Application got restarted. Yes. Success. Finally, we are able to insert the record into Redis server, guys. Now, let me get that record back from the Redis. So slash data slash data. So what is the ID I have given? 101 I have given a get request. Send it. Yes. I'm able to store the data into Redis and I'm able to get the data from the Redis. This data is available in the Redis. Let me insert one more record. 102 Raju, age 22. Send. I stored the Raju record. Okay. Now let me give 102 to retrieve. Now I'm able to retrieve Raju record. Yes. So we are able to insert a record into Redis server by using hash ops.put, and we are able to retrieve the data by using hash ops.get. So tomorrow I will tell you how to retrieve all the keys, how to update the data in the Redis server. Okay, I will share these notes along with this code also. Please practice this before coming to tomorrow. What is Redis server? How we are connecting to the Redis server? We'll discuss that. Thank you guys. We'll see you in the tomorrow session.